Welcome back to the Weekly Driver podcast. My name is James Rea. I'm the editor and publisher of TheWeeklyDriver.com and an automotive columnist for Bay Area News Group. My colleague and friend is Bruce Aldrich. And today, I think, without too much reservation, I can say we're going to have the most fun we've had in a year of doing a podcast, because we have on today with us Kevin Mullan, who I read about. Kevin, I don't know if you saw the story, or I'm sure you've seen other stories written about you. That was on a newsletter that I get about beer, and you have the unusual combination of having a fire truck that's been converted into a mobile pub, so to speak, and it's a new enterprise for you. So welcome to our program. We're going to talk about beer and mobile trucks and fire trucks, and we just can't wait to jump in. So welcome to our podcast.
James, Bruce, thank you guys so much for having me. Excited to be a guest on the show. And frankly, I'm shocked that beer and fire trucks aren't more of a common thing. I'm surprised you guys are thinking this is unique.
I'm surprised too when I saw that. It's like an iPhone. Who needs an iPhone? Well, everybody does. Well, I think everybody needs a fire truck serving beer.
I know, it's great. Can you give us some background about how this came to pass? I read a little bit about you, and you've done a number of things in your career, including being a baseball announcer, which I'll ask about as well. But give us the genesis of how this all came about for you.
Sure. So I, my wife and I, in our careers have been working either directly with events or around events, and certainly we attend a lot of events. And for a couple of years, I lived in Dallas, Texas, and worked for a school and planned pretty big events for them. And had a guy that I kind of became close with that bought an antique fire truck and put a wood fire pizza oven on and a couple of beer taps. And I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
Yes.
About 5-6 years ago, we moved back to my hometown of Toledo, Ohio, and my wife and I just, kept talking about it as a lot of our friends were opening up, microbrews around town, and I'm seeing these major events that they can't be a part of because they don't have the equipment. And I said, man, it would be fun. Wouldn't it be great if, that beer fire truck existed in Toledo, that these guys could use to get into, major events. And, anybody who knows me knows that I've, way outkicked my coverage with my wife. But if you had any doubts about it, when you're married to somebody who, when you say, I think we should buy a fire truck and put beer taps on it, and she responds with, yes, that's a great idea, you've definitely found the right woman. And there's no question that I've just got an amazing partner in life and in business. And so we got to shopping and eventually found the perfect fire truck, and here we are.
Tell us about that truck. It's a 1987, looks like a fire engine to me. I mean, it looks like it could fight fires. It's in good condition.
That was and just a couple of months before we got it, it indeed did just that. It put out fires in Leonidas Township, Michigan. And my understanding is a change in the laws in Michigan. Fire departments are no longer allowed to ride in vehicles that have an open cab. And this vehicle has two seats that sit open air behind the main cab of the truck. So the station had to get rid of it. They offloaded it to a farmer who wanted to use it to water his fields. And the first day he drove it out onto the field, he hadn't even filled up the 1,500-gallon water tank, and it sank. So this is a 1987 E1 water pumper truck that had a 1,500-gallon water tank. It had the ability to pump all 1,500 gallons in about a minute, and it would shoot it 100 yards.
Wow.
So a pretty powerful pump on this. And that was, I put together sort of a small bucket list, if you were, of what I'd want to see in a fire truck to turn into a beer truck.
Kevin, sorry to interrupt, but it reminds me, did you do any studies on how fast you could unload 10 kegs of beer?
We have yet to determine that number.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
I've had a handful of people ask me if I'd be willing to do a fraternity party, and my guess is the first time we do that is the first time we'll determine that answer of how quickly we can unload 10 kegs of beer.
I'm sure you will. Yes.
So having the massive water tank on the back of the fire truck, for me, was going to alleviate a lot of the work. That was going to expedite the work. Because rather than have to rebuild the back end, I just need to take the back end off and remove the water tank. And then I've got a shell that I can use to turn into a pseudo walk-in cooler.
Gotcha.
And so I am, I'm terrible with cars. I might be the least handy person you guys have ever had on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I can't change my own oil. I can't change my own tires. On an early date that my wife and I had, I was hours late because I got a flat tire on my then Nissan Xterra, which, if you know that car, it has a full-size spare on the back.
Yes.
Yep.
And I was waiting for AAA to come change my tire, and my wife came and changed the tire. So
you do have a good woman. You have a great.
There's
gal.
your wife again.
There's
yeah.
your wife again. Good for you. I wouldn't have put up with that.
Yeah, no, yeah, unbelievable. So, and she tolerates me. I don't know how that happened.
Mm.
So all to say that, I had all these ideas of how it could work, and I've been blessed to, surround myself with great partners in the automotive and the build and the refrigeration and the beer line side that have come in and helped me kind of finish this project out. But, we've just got an incredible mechanic here in town, just outside of Toledo, small shop called Hudson Automotive that, when I first called the founder of Hudson and said, I've got this crazy idea to buy a fire truck and turn it into a beer truck. Can you guys help me get this thing working? He said, I have no idea how to do what you're talking about, but I really want to try.
That's great.
And they've just been awesome. So they took the water tank out for me. They did a couple of other kind of initial sort of prefab things for us. And then I had a local electrician who was sort of a welder on the side that him and some buddies came together, and one of the guys actually builds semi-trailers. And so he came and built the back end on the truck. And then I had a local refrigeration company that is friends of the family that consulted and installed a freezer unit in the back of it. And so, the back of this fire truck has a, 6 foot by 10 foot, wide, deep by, about 51 inches tall. When I put in quotes, say walk-in cooler on the back, mm-hmm. with a freezer unit in it. So it can get down to, we can get that thing down to, 26, 25 degrees. And we're serving ice cold beer off the side of a fire truck.
It's amazing how many friends you have and how many ingenious people there are when beer's involved.
Yeah, I've made a lot more friends in the last couple of months since I started telling people about this truck. So,
and
I've become pretty popular around the office.
I was thinking about, and I'm sure others have mentioned this, where when I was a younger guy, if you heard the ice cream truck coming down the street, you'd ask your mom or dad, or you saved your nickels and dimes and you got a popsicle. But it always seemed to me that the guys who were working those trucks were some, old men, that now guys probably my age, but that you weren't quite sure whether the ice cream truck guy was on the up and up, or he was just some poor guy who fell on hard times and there was a job that he could have. But you're a young guy, so the question, I guess, is a roundabout question. What have you gotten in response to who you are as a young man, I'm assuming, and you're doing this for a living, and you go into neighborhoods or events? What has that reaction been like? It must be all over the map.
Yeah, it's interesting. So first of all, I appreciate you calling me young, mm-hmm. and the comparison to a shady ice cream dealer. Thanks a lot for that.
I knew you were going to say that, but you're welcome.
Yeah. So just a little piece of advice for people that don't yet have kids or have young kids. My wife and I have taught our children that when the ice cream truck plays music, that's how they tell you that they're all out of ice cream.
Right.
And so it's really awesome. My kids hear that coming down the street, and they hear the music, and they're like, oh, the ice cream truck is out of ice cream again. So we've been able to avoid most of those interactions with our children. So just
Gotcha.
A little fun aside for you. For me, this is not a full-time job. I'm the vice president of business development for a award-winning marketing firm here in Toledo.
Great.
And I work on the largest, one of the largest and fastest-growing Jeep festivals in the country, in Toledo Jeep Fest.
You mentioned that.
And
that's
so
great.
That's my full-time job. And so this is just sort of a fun little hobby. I jokingly, we named the truck Ladder. So the company is Tapped 419 because my wife and I envision a day where we have more than just, one fire truck or more than just a fire truck. Maybe we, get into, we do a school bus or we do somebody joked that, a SWAT, an old SWAT van would be pretty amusing. I've looked at some really, some cool Willys panel trucks and panel vans and things like that would be a lot of fun to grab some antique cars and do some of this stuff too.
Sure.
And so we anticipate the fleet to grow, but Ladder 419, the fire truck, is a nod to the area code 419 in Toledo. But I jokingly, my wife and I joked that I was going to call it Ladder 529 because really the plan is, this is an investment to help pay for private school and college for our children.
Gotcha.
Okay. I wondered where 419 came from.
Now we know. In other areas, so many different things come to mind. When we had a telephone conversation a while back or an email, or maybe both, I forgot when you explained that legally there aren't that many hurdles to go over. You don't need a special license. Are there some ABC involvement? What's involved in terms of selling beer in the way that you do it?
Yeah, so to sell beer, you need to have a permit to legally sell beer, and so there's two ways you can get that. You can get if you have a physical standing building, you can request from your local government a liquor permit. If you're hosting an event, a festival, something like that, and you're a charity, you can request a temporary liquor permit.
I see.
Currently, at least not in Toledo, I'm not sure there are any in the country, there are not mobile liquor permits. So the same way that a food truck is a restaurant on wheels that gets licensed as a restaurant, is inspected by the health department, all of those things, that sort of analogy doesn't really live in the alcohol world. So my business is unique because, while we are a mobile beer truck, we're not actually in the beer business. We're really, squarely in the rental business. So if you're looking to have this for your festival or your party, you rent the truck from us and then purchase the beer directly through the distributor or directly through the brewery. And so, there's a point I'm working on getting the permit to allow us to actually transport the alcohol. So if you bought beer from 7 different breweries and wanted me to drive the fire truck around and pick it up before I come to your event, we're getting licensed to be able to do that. But in the meantime, the way that the event works, so the event that we have, so far, I'm basically meeting the kegs at the party. And those are either delivered by the person who rented it or by the brewery. And we load them into the back of the truck and turn on the refrigeration unit, and we're good to go.
Gotcha.
I see. And what about, you don't have to have beer, right? Do you do cider or whatever the customer wants they can put in that thing?
If you can put it in a keg, we can serve it. And we've got the ability, for the right event and kind of the right opportunity, we've got the ability to swap out the keg connectors. So currently we use a Sankey keg, which is kind of the normal kind of keg. But if you're a home brewer, you'd use what's called a corny keg. And so that's a different connector. But, if we see a demand for us to do more homebrew type events, then certainly we'd get the parts to be able to support that. We can swap out our CO2 for nitrogen, and we can do nitrogen beer. We can also do cold brew coffee through that. Already we've done both beer and soda. So we've got a place in town that we partner with for a couple of events that does, you can get 5 different kinds of soda in a keg. And so we had root beer and 2 different kinds of beer at our launch party in mid-May, and that was a huge hit. So the kids loved coming up and getting themselves a glass of root beer, and the adults loved coming up, being kids, getting beer off the side of a fire truck.
Wow, that's great. Do you guys hang out by the truck? I mean, you got to make sure it's running and the cooler stays cool, but you don't do any of the pouring then?
Correct. Yep. We don't do any of the pouring. So if you've got us at an event, if it's for a festival, your volunteers or your staff will still serve the same way they would off of a beer trailer you might get from a major distributor. If this is for a party in your backyard, honestly, I recommend letting people serve themselves. And
Me too, absolutely. Always.
Kevin, what if going back to my weak analogy of the ice cream truck? What if, let's just say Bruce and I had one of these contraptions, and it's 105 degrees in Sacramento in the summertime, and we just went into various neighborhoods. We have East Sacramento, Land Park. Can you just drive around the neighborhood and guys mowing his lawn, and you drive by and the guy says, "Sure, I want a cold beer." Can you approach it that way? And do people do that?
So I am not an attorney. I don't work for liquor control, and so don't quote me on this, but I believe that if you pulled into that gentleman's driveway and gave him a beer for free, you'd be totally fine to do that.
I see.
You cannot sell him that beer without the license to do that. You need a permit to be able to sell it.
I see.
But if you wanted to drive around the city and give away free beer to people, it would be functionally no different than you pulling your car up into his driveway and handing him a can of whatever your favorite beer may be, and you'd probably be fine to do that.
You'd have
I joked with the city in an early conversation with some folks from the city as I kind of worked through just to make sure that the permitting side was all covered and we were good.
Yes.
I said, just I need you to tell me no, because I really want to do this, but my hope is to someday drive this truck in a parade and hand out free beers while I'm driving in the parade.
Fantastic. That's a good dream to have.
Exactly.
And they said, absolutely not. You absolutely cannot do that. You cannot pour a beer in the middle of a city street and just hand it out. But if I drove through everybody's front yard, it'd be totally fine because I'd be on private property.
You can drive your fire truck through my front yard anytime.
My instinct tells me that that's going to be one of your goals, and you're going to be doing that before too long, and you're going to somehow work with the city because you're going to make an arrangement. Because it reminds me, this is a little bit of a stretch, but it reminds me of being in France at the Tour de France, where they have this caravan of publicity, and Bruce went one year, and all the event sponsors do exactly what you just said. They stop along the way, and they hand you, if there's a coffee sponsor, they hand you a small cup of coffee, or if there's a Perrier or Pellegrino as a water, they're handing this out along the route of the Tour de France. I'm sure there's some way that the city of Toledo will come around to that on some level, but we'll see.
We've got we have an incredible administration. I mean, our county and city government here in Toledo is just awesome, and they're very forward thinking. And there's been an incredible boom in our downtown from an event, perspective.
Yes.
If there's, listeners to the podcast that are fans of the TV show MASH, you'll know Jamie Farr.
Sure.
And Jamie, is from the Toledo area, always wore Toledo Mud Hens apparel and talked about Tony Pacos, which are two staples in Toledo. And our ballpark is downtown, and Tony Pacos is right across the street from the ballpark. And we've got something in our area we call Dora. It's a designated outdoor recreation area. And what it means is that in most of this downtown area in Toledo, you can buy a beer from any bar you want, and you can walk right out the front door with it. And you can wander the streets of downtown Toledo and explore, the outside of the ballpark area and our, outdoor concert series and things like that. And so that area continues to expand.
That's
so
great.
I say that, 10 years ago, you couldn't bring a beer, you couldn't walk your drink out of an establishment. And today you can. 20 years ago, you couldn't run a restaurant out of a school bus. Today you can.
Gotcha.
Do I think that at some point in time there will be regulations that allow you to have a mobile liquor permit? Probably.
Yes.
That's not why I got into this. I'm not trying to get on the front end of that industry, but I expect it to happen at some point.
Sure.
Certainly, I've had people tell me that they would love it if I could roll up at their food truck festivals and be the guy who's selling beer out of the fire truck. But that's not. It's really not even the business that I want to be in. The goal for me is really to support community events and do something unique for Toledo, and do something that supports small local businesses that are trying to grow. And
That's
so
great.
As we look at some of the really cool major events that happen in our region, I want to lean in and be a part of that. And the response to the early coverage on this truck has been incredible. I've gotten requests from a couple of fire stations on the East Coast to be a part of, centennial celebrations. So 100 and 125 year anniversaries of the opening of their first fire departments. And so it'll be fun. I never anticipated this to be a national traveler, but, maybe we do drive this thing around the country and we see where it goes.
And your debut was in May?
We did a kickoff, again, so half this podcast can be talking about how amazing my wife is.
Yeah.
So we did a kickoff on May 18th, which was my 38th birthday. And my wife said we were talking to a local festival about possibly being in. We weren't sure if the truck was going to be ready yet or not. And they elected to rent a boring old trailer with 4 beer taps on the side of it from a place about an hour and a half away from Toledo. And so my wife said, well, if they're not going to use the truck, let's throw our own birthday party. And so that's what we did. That was the official debut of Ladder 419, was on May 18th in Toledo. And we invited a couple hundred of our closest friends to come out. A buddy of mine owns a food truck here in town, and so Dietz Barbecue came out and served barbecue to people, and we gave away free beer and root beer, and had a heck of a time. We had beautiful weather, and it was a great time.
I can only imagine that must have been a great gathering. One idea that I thought about is that looking a little bit on the internet and finding other parts of the country that people do different panel trucks you mentioned in passing. Was this a phenomenon maybe after Prohibition? Do these kinds of beer mobile pubs, did it have a history years ago that you might have discovered? Have you looked in any research from back in the day, as the expression goes?
Yeah, no, not that I have found. I mean, it's amazing. If you Google, beer fire truck or tap truck or things like that.
Yes.
The different kind of vehicles that you'll see beer taps on. I mean, there's I'm gonna get the name wrong, but it's like Company 57, I think, maybe out of Colorado. That is a fire truck that serves pizza. I mean, it's some really cool things, and there's like a slide where they actually make the pizza up on top of the fire truck and put it down this awesome metal slide and like slide it down to you.
Wow.
There's a lot of really creative people around the country doing a lot of creative things.
Sure.
And I'm humbled to be included in that conversation, but a lot of neat things that are happening, and I think people I don't want to get into the specific kind of math of all of this, but I'll just say that if you hop onto a govdeals.com or Facebook Marketplace and you search for a fire truck, I think you're going to be shocked at how little you can pick one up for.
Wow. I think I'd like to get a trailer that makes pizza, and I'd let you pull it around, and we'll share pizza and beer.
We'll partner.
Yeah.
Sounds like we're onto something. I like it.
And without, at your, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, can you give us some idea of cost of, and I noticed that, you have a 4-hour rental, 3-day rental, 10 taps. Is there any kind of parameters that you could put to that financially if you care to, and if you don't, it's okay as well?
Yeah, no, happy to talk about it. Yeah, so there's, what I've discovered just in kind of the early days of us getting this business out is that, every event is going to be customized. And so,
sure.
While we say, the stock event, so if you had a party in your backyard from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. and you were within 20 miles of Toledo, it's $450. We bring the truck. We've got somebody who's there to make sure everything keeps working and the event runs smoothly. And we'll consult you on, where and what and how much beer to get for your party, and then kind of coordinate, as it goes on, kind of how that all works. But it's $450, and you're out the door. If it's a little bit further away, we'll look at reasonable charges for transportation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fire truck, so I joke that most vehicles fuel economy is measured in miles per gallon. My fire truck is measured in gallons per mile.
Nice.
So it doesn't have phenomenal fuel economy. It's actually about truthfully, it's about 2 to 3 miles a gallon.
Oh,
and
my.
so, as we look at, if we're going to drive to the East Coast for an event, we would ask the event sponsor to cover the cost of that transportation.
Sure.
But we want to work with people, and we want to make it, we want to make an event successful for people. And I think, with my experience in the event world, with my experience in the marketing world, I'll also probably be just likely to tell somebody, I think this is a great idea, but I think it's going to be too expensive for you to, do it successfully for your event. And I'm happy to be honest with people on that.
Sure. Are there, thinking this through a little bit, are you responsible? Like if you're a bartender, for example, at the local pub, and a guy's had, too many beers, I'll just put it that way without putting a number on it. Do you have any legal responsibility at all to say, your guests can drink as much as they want, but you've got to keep an eye on them, so to speak, or is that not part of the equation at all?
Yeah, so I think we have so the question there is really a legal obligation and a moral obligation.
Yes.
Do I think we have a moral obligation to, advise people on how to host and run an event safely and successfully? Absolutely.
Yes.
Legally, what's the role that we play in cutting somebody off or being involved in that? Unfortunately, I think, attorneys would tell me the less we do in that space, the safer we are.
Mm-hmm. The Weekly Driver podcast gets support from AmericanTrucks.com. Visit www.americantrucks.com.
But I want to make sure people are safe. And what our team is kind of trained and instructed to do is to lead with safety in mind over profitability. So if we need to shut an event down because people aren't being safe, or we need to have a conversation with the event director and say, hey, we got to fix this. Absolutely, we're going to do that. And if that means that I need to, turn the taps off and refund somebody's money because it isn't working, we're going to do that. We'll make that determination because
you're going to take
I really want to err on safety.
You're going to take your little fire truck and go home. That's probably good.
Yeah,
exactly.
Kevin, in that part of the country, I'm involved also in writing about beer for a couple of publications, and I came upon this idea of it's starting in Sacramento, called Guest Brewer. And if I'm from Toledo, Ohio, but I live in Sacramento now, and there's a pub, a craft beer place that has the best craft beer, a pub in Sacramento can somehow work with this company called pipeline.com, and they can bring that beer from Toledo to a Sacramento microbrewery or a beer place for a month or 90 days. All of that said, what are some popular beers that you've been asked to pour in at your events? Does it vary, or are there very mainstream products that you've poured?
Yeah, so we did our kickoff party. We worked with a local brewery in town called Patron Saints.
Yes,
where all the beers are named after saints.
Fantastic.
And so we served St. John and St. Luke. St. John is an IPA. St. Luke is more of a kind of a lighter beer. And a more recent event we did, they had Bud Light and Summer Shandy.
Okay.
So you can have mainstream kind of largely distributed beers, or you can have something that somebody's doing out of at a home brew. There's just a lot of opportunities and a lot of different ways we can do this. But we've got an event coming up with the local community where they've reached out to 3 or 4 different local breweries and said, give me 3 of your favorite beers. And so they're going to bring in beers that they make, and they'll come from a couple of different breweries. And I envision that to be, most of my events will probably look more like that, where there's a couple of breweries that come in, and they each get a couple of taps, and we let people, taste and sample and enjoy and see, just kind of some of the talent that exists in our community for making great beer.
I would assume the breweries are all over this, right? They want to get the word out on their beer into new markets.
Yeah, they're pretty excited about it. So I've had some great conversations with some of the local bars and breweries, and even it's we've got a bar downtown that throws some pretty big parties different times of the year, and so we've talked about, it's an Irish pub, so we've talked about working with them around St. Patrick's Day. This becomes a unique. I've had conversations with caterers about just the fact that it's a mobile refrigerator. So there's people that don't even want to use it for the beer, that want to use it for catering events, and to have a mobile refrigerator, that they don't otherwise have access to in the community. So there's a lot of different potential applications to this, and even just that, there isn't another fire truck for rent in the community. So even if you don't want to serve beverages off of it, if you're doing a grand opening for a store or a restaurant or something like that, and you want something that catches people's eye, a fire truck will do that.
That's
great. We had an amusing, I'll say amusing, hopefully I don't think it's a safety hazard, but I was doing some work on the truck the other day, actually had it parked in my front yard, and apparently there was an emergency call to the park that's 2 houses away from us. So as I'm getting ready to actually back the fire truck out of my driveway, a fire truck and an ambulance come flying down the road, and they slowed down at my house because they thought, well, maybe somebody got the address wrong.
Oh my!
And they thought, well, there's already a fire truck here, and luckily they quickly figured out that that's ladder 419, not one of theirs, and they continued their way to get and take care of the people safely. But I think it's by design, we've made it. We try to keep it looking as much like a fire truck as we can, and the local fire department and the union have been incredibly supportive of sort of my nod and kind of tribute to our local first responders.
That's great. Hey, I had this weird idea that, depending upon one's perspective, if you weren't serving beer and you went to somebody's birthday party or some other function, you could have your wife or you and your buddies take it to an extreme, and you could have your wife and her girlfriends let's just say dress appropriately for a birthday party and look kind of provocative. Or if it was a woman's birthday party, we've never met, and I hope I'm not insulting you or your wife, but you and your buddies could go out and host the women's birthday party in your scantily fireman's attire, something like that. You'd attract a whole new clientele. I don't really know, but it just came to mind.
Yeah, one of the early people to follow me or like one of my posts on Instagram actually was a group of guys that I think do just that.
Like
and that
Chippendales.
was a line of business that I wasn't really looking to get into.
Yes.
So I was like, well, that's interesting. So that certainly caught my attention. I went, well, that's not the business that I'm really looking to get into. But I think it's interesting because I've had almost everybody I've talked to has had a different interest in the truck. Certainly, it's been cool to me to have people reach out and say, hey, we want to get this for my grandfather's 90th birthday party. He's a retired firefighter. We want to have
that's
this
a great one.
We, honor, as we honor our local firefighters in a celebration or anniversary of our fire department. We want to have this be a part of it. And even in conversations with a couple local fire departments saying, how can we use this as a fundraiser for the fire department, for the families of fallen firefighters?
Oh my gosh, that's a great idea.
The community. And so I had a conversation with the local Boys and Girls Club about me bringing the fire truck, out this summer with an ice cream machine. Let's put some root beer on it and let the kids make root beer floats.
Oh, that would be great.
The way we've decorated the truck is you won't know that it's a beer truck unless you really pay attention. I mean, obviously, I've got a beer and a beer cap in my logo, but the company is intentionally named Tapped 419, not Beer Truck 419.
Gotcha.
And nowhere on the truck will you see the word beer, because I want to be able to, my kids love how welcoming local firefighters are, and allowing them to get on a fire truck and see it, or if they're out washing it, living in a small community, be able to interact with firefighters like that. And not everybody has that experience. So if I can be a way to, take the truck out to more communities and out in front of more kids and let them, get on and play with and see a fire truck, let's do it. And if I can be someone to come and brighten a kid's day by giving them a root beer float, or working with local firefighters to give root beer floats to kids from the Boys and Girls Club, I'm excited to do some of those things and partner with the community and have this really be an avenue for good things to happen.
Under the umbrella of win-win, I think you've covered a lot of bases.
Do you have another vehicle picked out, or have you been scanning the want ads?
No, I want to stay married. So for right now, I am not going to publicly acknowledge that whether I have or have not been looking for my second vehicle.
In another area that's very good. I did an article recently on a local pub, and it was about lunchtime, and the woman asked me if I wanted to taste what I was writing about, and I said sure. She said, well, they called it an employee pour, and I wondered if, in your experience now, the people do you allow yourself and your wife, if you're delivering these things, do you get to taste the product before you come home or when you're delivering it, or do you have some rules guidelines that you've stuck by that no drinking on the job, or does that even come into play?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a no drinking on the job.
Okay.
If you're the one that's transporting the truck, I certainly don't want to put you behind the wheel of a 19,000-pound vehicle while you've had anything to drink that day. So that certainly is not allowed. I tell my wife it's the incredible irony, because I love local beer and I love local events, and if I'm taking the truck to an event, I don't get to enjoy the event the same way other people do. But
Gotcha.
I'm looking forward to seeing the truck out, and I've always really enjoyed watching other people have a good time. And
That's
so
great.
Being in the event world, you regularly plan a really great party and you enjoy it from a different perspective, and that's what's going to happen with this truck. Is I'm going to get a chance to see thousands of people have a positive interaction with the truck, get a chance to experience great local beers and support great local businesses, and I sort of get the enjoyment of sitting back and watching that happen, and knowing that I played a small role in making that possible.
That's great.
It's a great looking truck. I saw it on the website.
Yeah, it's
I'll
beautiful.
put some of those pictures up on our the video side of this podcast.
Hey, Kevin, that's a
Awesome, thank you.
good time to call it an episode. You just have an awful lot of information. There's probably 1,000 more questions we could ask, but we'll save it for another time. And you've also emailed me with the Jeep event that you are part of, so we'll be in touch on that as well. But in the meantime, we want to thank Kevin Mullan for the fun half hour of talking about the fire truck and tept419.com. Check it out. It's a beautiful website, and he's just got what an entrepreneurial project. And it just sounds like I want to get on a plane tomorrow and go to the next function that you guys have. Bruce and I will.
I like fire trucks even more now.
Yeah, we like fire trucks. We like beer. So what a combination. Though, thanks, Kevin, very much for being our guest. We didn't even talk about your career with the Toledo Mud Hens. We'll do that some other time. But I'm a big baseball guy, so we'll talk about that some other time. But thanks again for being our guest today on the Weekly Driver podcast. We really liked your company. Thank you.
Hey, thank you guys so much for the opportunity. Appreciate the great work you guys are doing. And if you ever make your way to Toledo, please look me up.
Sure will. Thanks.
You too. Thanks.
Enjoy the day. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Weekly Driver podcast gets support from AmericanMuscle.com, your late model Mustang and F-150 authority, bringing you the hottest products and top-notch customer service for over a decade. No one makes it easier to modify your ride. Visit AmericanMuscle.com today